All right, Reece, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about how the back office can actually be a competitive advantage. We're also going to talk about what are some of the biggest areas for improvements that building shops can make sure they have buttoned up before they start getting super deep into growth or scale. Really, just the importance of back office and the efficiencies from the eyes of an operations director.
Yeah, and Levi, who we'll have on here, is a little bit of an operations savant here. So you'll hear
He
more
really
about his
is.
background and a lot of the changes he made. So I think this is a good one. Let's dive into it.
Yeah, let's do it. Today, on another episode of Builders, Budgets, and Beers, we're joined with our guest, Levi Joseph. Levi, why don't you go ahead and give yourself a little intro? Let the audience know who you are.
Sure. My name is Levi Joseph. I'm the Director of Operations at Ladisic Fine Homes in Atlanta, Georgia. We're the largest custom home renovation company by revenue, according to the Atlanta Business Chronicle. And that's only about half our business. The other half is new build. A little bit about me. I came actually from the corporate world. I worked in analytics for 5 years. The last firm I worked for was in this residential real estate world on the startup side. And I decided to pivot, go work in-house at a home builder. And yeah, that's how I ended up at Ladisic. And we implemented Adaptive a few months ago. We have all of our project managers on it. And happy to be here.
Cool. Levi, so what's your position at Ladisic?
Yeah, so I'm the Director of Operations. That basically means most of my day, maybe 50, 60%, is spent supporting our projects directly. At this point, we have 18 projects going, and the average budget is about $3 million, to give you a sense of scale. The remainder of my day, I do a lot of stuff with compliance. So that's basically insurance, permits, licensure. And then I support our Director of Finance heavily on the cash flow side. So I mainly handle accounts receivable, though I do help her some of the accounts payable. And that's probably where Adaptive has been the biggest help. The first week we implemented, we saved her probably 10 hours just that week.
Dang.
So she's probably, outside of me, one of the biggest cheerleaders for Adaptive. And the other things I do is I do all of our IT and some of our HR. So kind of lots of hats. And it's really kind of day by day. Some days are spent more on the financial side. Today was one of those days. Others, I'm out at a site helping a project manager work through a permitting issue with the city.
Okay, cool. So operations. So you handle kind of setting up all the processes within the company. Maybe you pass it off to. Maybe you come up with a financial process. Maybe you pass it off to, say, the Director of Finance, but maybe you also end up just retaining ownership of the process as well. It sounds like with certain aspects of the business. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say that's true. That's true. Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so you're the operations guy. You've told me in the past that you consider back office management to be a competitive advantage in building. Can you talk about that for the audience? I think people will be interested to hear more about this. What does that mean?
Yeah. So, Ladisic really grew out of our owner's garage. So he's actually a lawyer by training, and this was a bit of a career pivot for him. And as the years have progressed, and we've gone from building one house in his neighborhood to now we have 18 projects going at once, 30 in our pipeline. Things have had to change, and part of that is building processes to get us to a place where we are just what you described. We are competing directly on our back office. I'd say that we experience that most day to day on the AP side. That said, everything from IT selection to the way in which we manage our compliance, doing things like our workers' comp audit. We, count for every dollar. We don't cut a check unless we ensure that there's insurance in place, and having systems to make sure of that quickly so it doesn't become burdensome. So yeah, my boss Michael likes to say that basically 80% of our business isn't related to construction. It's running the business around the construction. And that's probably how we've ended up the size we are today.
You made a comment, Levi, about you compete in the back office. Expand on that a little bit more. What do you mean when you have like a competitive back office or you're competing in the back office?
Yeah. So the way I think about it is, residential construction is interesting in that it's kind of a fractured market, and it's a fractured market both at the vendor side. So like you see that right now, you see private equity firms trying to roll up these lumber yards across the country, right? And you still have mom and pop lumber yards. And the same thing is true of general contractors. Most of our competitors, it's a family. Oftentimes it'll be the son or daughter of a previous owner, right? And so you end up kind of having this network of these small firms who all use very similar subcontractors and vendors. Now, granted, we are lucky where I'd say 50% of our subcontractors, we're 80% of their business. So a lot of folks are very, very loyal to us. That said, we do have people come in our office. We do both ACHs and checks, obviously, but a lot of people like a physical check. They come in, they grab a Gatorade, they want to talk to us, pick up their check, and they'll mention to me basically, every invoice by a certain date gets paid 5 days later, and every invoice by another date, it gets paid 5 days later. And we do basically 2 payrolls a month. And we basically don't miss. The only instances in which we would miss are something related to performance. So I don't know, a painter messed up a detail and we're withholding a tiny percentage of their check just to make sure that gets finished. And that's something they'd usually be aware of. They'd come in and they'd expect, that check is $2,000 less than what they invoiced. And the other instances, occasionally in punch, we may hold every check as we're waiting to get paid the final payment. And it's just a way of accountability on the overall project. But besides that, we're getting invoices by a certain date and we're cutting them, and we move heaven and earth to make that happen. And we have some sophisticated financing to ease that process, and the way in which we manage our AR ties into that. We have lots of different ways of projecting what we're going to spend, and what it does, it breeds loyalty. Good example of that is in 2008, pretty much. So our bank had 100 builders, and by the end of the crisis, they had 2, and we were one of them.
Dang.
And so all those subcontractors, it's actually quite wild. And there's advantages that afterward, right? It kind of clears the field. And definitely contributed to our growth. But all those subcontractors who, stuck with us and we kept paying them, they were extremely loyal. So beyond, the week to week, do we get paid on time? It's understanding that loyalty comes through performance and ongoing performance. And then, I'll give you another good example. We did a renovation recently. We spent $3 million in 4 months. Mm-hmm. Which is unusual for us. I mean, we have
big budgets. Big remodel. That's a doozy.
Yeah. A tight turn. And there was other, I'd say, strategic reasons why this client mattered a lot to us. Mm-hmm. We made it happen. And the last 2 weeks we were there, I would say most days there were over 20 people on site. And then there was a few days where there was 40 up to 60, even maybe closer to 80, right? And the fact that all those subs would drop things and move us in their schedule has a lot to do with not just the fact that our the dollar amounts are large, but that we've been loyal to them and we pay them on time and we honor our commitments, right? We say what we're going to do, and then we do it. That's when you hear just through the grapevine, you just hear from subs complaining about other folks or thanking us. So the fact that we compete on it emerges.
Okay, yeah. So Reece, I guess at the beginning asked about competing in the back office. You're talking about strong back office processes, not necessarily like you have a really competitive back office where the finance and HR is fighting, but you have such strong processes in the back office that your company executes better than the competition, which establishes loyalty from subs, establishes brand value with clients, and all these other things. Is that's what you're saying as back office as a competitor?
Yeah. It's in the same way our project managers are excellent at quality control. We are excellent at doing processes on a day-to-day basis, knowing that on longer time horizons, they put us ahead.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and that's great clarity, because that's, you made a comment about you guys being in the top 2% of builders that made it. And with your bank, there was 100, call it, and they you guys were the top two, whatever. Why do those other guys fail? Like, I think it's pretty easy to say like process helps you grow your business. And then you, with those processes comes effective execution. And with that effective execution comes loyalty from a subcontractor. But what's the hang up with, why wasn't there 50 builders? Why was there only 2? Like, what's the code? How do you crack that to remain relevant and grow?
I would like to say it's 100% skill. I'm sure there's some component of luck, so I'm only going to talk to the skill component.
Sure.
But I mean, we do a lot in terms of thinking about our portfolio and being careful. The spec building, so building speculative homes where the client is not known, there's a lot of opportunity there in terms of basically margin. But client work is sort of the thing that remains even when times get tough.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also hard to be really good at both.
Mm-hmm.
We are definitely good spec builders, like the home. And part of the reason I would say we're, not like the best possible spec builders is we don't really build our specs much different than we build our client homes. So like that, like theoretical margin you might get from cutting corners or value engineering, we don't do a ton of that. We just we build it like we build it for a customer. And in this case, our owner's the customer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But our core expertise is in client work. And so when we think about our portfolio and what lets us survive downturns and thrive in the aftermath is being right-sized. And so we try to be, 80, 20, 90, 10 client to spec.
Mm-hmm.
And then we try to also kind of like stay abreast of market conditions. So and part of this is where we are in the market. We have a lot of sophisticated clientele and we ask them kind of like, how are they navigating market dynamics? And yeah, we have a perspective, and that's partially process driven. So we have different kind of like, we call them like views on our pipeline. And one of them is more revenue oriented and one of them is more ongoing project oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we just try and kind of like surf market conditions, think about spec versus client work, maintain a core competency in one, and then blocking and tackling a business beyond there. You just, you pay your bills, you try and spend the bank's money when you can, you maintain a reserve of, like a loan you can draw against if you need to manage cash flow, just basic stuff like that done well.
Well, and go ahead. If you want to touch her, I was going to expand on that even more.
No, yeah, I was curious to hear more about the paying subs. We can come back to that.
Well, that's kind of where I was going to elaborate to is like, of course, is like, there's a component of luck, insulating yourself, like having like a business savvy team, but how much and were you at Ladisic in 2008 when that happened?
I was not. So granted, all of this is, I've had lots through the grapevine, and my boss is a real mentor to me. So I've sort of picked his brain in terms of his whole career.
For sure. But even then, I think it's more so as like having the healthy business practices is like the overarching umbrella there. But how much do you attribute that to running like a quality back office, even at the size of wherever it was at Ladisic? Because your comment earlier was like 80% of running a construction company is not around like construction. It's more of like managing the business side. How much do you attribute it to? And what are the biggest important pieces?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably just that. It is back office most of the time. I mean, the way I would think about it is I'd phrase it differently. The front office is table stakes. So if we're not building beautiful and well-made houses, like we don't exist, right? So that goes without saying. In terms of the back office side, a lot of it comes also to right sizing. So when the business was smaller, my role was combined with the director of finance's role. And you see that like when I look at other of our competitors, you see the smaller firms tend to do that. And it makes sense to do that at a certain size, I would say, like, just from a pure salary and comp consideration. But then you reach a point where some balls have to be dropped. So it's either you're not doing the finance side as well, you're not doing the operations side as well. And I'd say usually once you split further than that, you might split finance into AR and AP. We're not quite there, but I know other firms who are larger than us, that's probably the next split they make. You thinking about ratios, another way to think about it is kind of like one ratio we think about is projects to PM. So we think about 2 to 1. We want to have 2 projects to 1 PM active, right? And what that lets us do, we have some delineation between site supervisor and PM, but that's separate for this conversation. That lets us understand, like, do we have enough work, right? Because we find in an ideal world, like a PM would be rolling on to a project right as they're finishing up another. And there's a few reasons why that's helpful, but generally speaking, a 2-to-1 ratio of PMs to projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or sorry, projects to PM.
Mm-hmm.
Another ratio we think about is back office to employee. So currently we run about 2 back office and then 10 employees or 10 field employees,
Interesting.
right? So it's like a 1-to-5 ratio. There's like arguments to be made. We could do it like more like a 1-to-3 ratio. I've seen other firms do that. And the way I think about that is like, one, you can throw people at problems. So here we use processes in lieu of people to manage that. So I like to think our processes are good enough where we maybe need less people. And then another way to think about it is basically owner involvement and stress. So like Michael would rather keep a small, tight back office and be a little bit more involved and therefore probably a little bit more stressed as it relates to back office things. Whereas, if all he wanted to do all day was be out in the field building houses, which is probably the thing he, if I had to guess, prefers, maybe. I don't want to speak for him. Then he could, have more back office staff. And I just think that's
Right.
that's a decision, right?
Totally. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that the 80% of what was the exact quote again? The 80% of home building business isn't about building; it's about running the business. Is that roughly right? I think
Something
that makes
like
sense.
that. Maybe I overstated because
that's a Levi Joseph quote.
Yeah, you can quote me. I'm sure my PMs might disagree, but
that could be the quote. No. I mean, I think it makes sense. You said earlier, right? Competitive is construction's a fragmented market. I think it's a relatively competitive market. I think to explain kind of an analogy, right? You're emphasizing the importance of execution when you're operating in a competitive market. If there's insatiable demand for Chinese food in like Atlanta and there's no Chinese restaurants and you open the only Chinese restaurant, you could have probably terrible service and people are still going to buy your food and you're still going to make money. But if a bunch of other Chinese restaurants come to town, your operations, your back office starts to matter a lot more. So it's probably, it's the same concept for you in the construction business. And that's what you're emphasizing now, which makes total sense. A specific example of that you touched on was the trades that work with you, right? And your ability to pay them reliably, on time, give enough work, et cetera, has created a dynamic where they're loyal to you and working with you. How much of an advantage is this for Ladisic? Is there a trade shortage in your markets? Do you believe that, the trades you work with are just substantially better than most of the other firms that are available in Atlanta? Can you talk more about this?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say a lot of this depends on the trade. There are definitely trades we have, and I'd say even specific vendors and subcontractors where we think those are better than your average. And there's ones of them that we will not tell people about. As far as we're concerned, they are core to our competitive advantage. And for example, like we used to do a lot more Instagram promotion and be much more okay with our tradespeople reposting our projects. And we found that our tradespeople were getting poached through that. So we now have not a formal policy, but a little bit of a policy of like, hey, there's a fine line of your marketing and our marketing. So you have to manage that. That said, there's definitely, I would say, an overall shortage in specific trades. We probably experience it most acutely on the MEP, so the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing trades. It's not to say there aren't good vendors. It's just that it's not like this huge competitive landscape of I have 10 good guys to pick from. We have a few good guys, and they're usually at different price points depending on the project. And if one of them is booked up, it becomes a problem. And then we have like an internal issue with that where in some instances we're so dependent on guys because we like working with them that we might overbook them. And from there they're just going to say yes to work oftentimes, and then we end up in a position where they made commitments to our people oftentimes across town, and things start to fall through the cracks. So we have to be careful on our side. And one thing we're trying to get better at is maintaining kind of an internal calendar for our core trades wherever they've been allocated. And I know there are other firms that are very strong in that process. And we're trying to kind of head in that direction.
Okay. And this is something, so obviously certain people are more skilled than others when it comes to the trades. It sounds like you're working with the best. Is this something that you think you can communicate to your clients and it helps you win more jobs? Do they believe
that
you?
Our trade base?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one, yes. And then two, a thing we like to do is be very strong on warranty. So we have like we talk internally about like on a project, like we don't really care about change orders because like that comes with the job, right? If you're going to build a multi-million-dollar house, there's going to be change orders, and we just like sort of say yes within reason, right? Same thing kind of applies on warranty, where I don't want to say it's an unlimited warranty, but we send our people out 10 years after we've built their house. We will not only will we dispatch project managers to manage the project, like like let's say they're preparing for a wedding at their house and they have like a couple things in a punch list. We'll send out a PM, but we'll also tell our subs, like, it is very important to you that you treat this like you would treat a new client, because in Atlanta, so much of our marketing is done word of mouth. We maintain a website. We do a lot of Instagram, but we do basically no marketing. And that's just because people hear about us through the grapevine. The 3 main markets we operate in are everyone kind of knows everyone. And part of that is honoring your warranty and telling your subs, hey, all of this matters. It's not just the new stuff. So yeah, we definitely compete on that. We compete on warranty. We understand reputation. I mean, most of the time we're hired before the architect, which is unusual for builders. Yeah.
Okay. Got it. So the trades, the quality of trades as it pertains to your clients is often showing up in you offering, you're saying, a better warranty program because
and also in finish.
Yeah.
They see amazing finishes.
Okay.
We have this one plaster guy, unbelievable. I mean, it's restaurant grade stuff done in homes, right? It's just, and then the photograph's amazing, and people see them, they ask who we use, and it's a whole thing.
That's Reece. Reece does that on the side.
Big plaster guy.
Plaster.
Some of the PMs now were joking about how we got to open a plaster business just because it seems like a great business.
Yeah.
Steady hand. Okay. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. So you have the best subs, and you think that a large reason you've been able to get them, obviously you guys have a lot of business, but is because you pay on time, you pay reliably. Is that right? Have they ever told you that?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm working.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. They like working for us. We try and treat them well. We sponsor people for citizenship. We remember birthdays. We, try and send cards when kids graduate from college. Like, we try to, in the same way we relation with our clients, we relation with our subs. I mean, they come in, I give them a hug. They know Michael's kids. It's, in many ways, it's why I love this world. It feels it's a more human version of business than I've encountered in some other roles I've been in, I guess.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay. And that's kind of interesting. Another example of like back office, I guess, execution, keeping track of everyone's birthdays and stuff. That
we try. We're not perfect, but we try.
I don't know Reece's birthday. Reece, what's your birthday?
Dude, you don't know my birthday? Come on now.
No, I do.
Come on.
No,
I don't even know my birthday. It's December 29th. You can send me some cards. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to derail this, but I'm just like, I want to know, Levi, like, okay, so Matt, like, Ladisic is just doing an awesome job. And if for the listeners out there, if you want to have like a little idea, go look at their Instagram, go to their website. It's world-class product that Ladisic is putting up. But that's not everybody, right? Like that, like you guys, I would consider like a top 1% builder. Like just like you guys have made it in a lot of eyes of builders. For the guys that aren't there or they aspire to be there, right? A lot of this is relationships and the thoroughness and the processes and the execution. What are some of the things that you saw when you joined Ladisic that you were highlighting and saying is needed to be tightened up?
Interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of our own things, we could tighten up.
Yeah.
So for us, that was mainly AR. So, okay. And for what it's worth, we recently had a builder out in Louisiana come in. He just reached out to us. He said, "I want to come shadow," and he came and he shadowed up with us for 2 days. Took 2 days off of his own jobs just to see our processes, which I think was like awesome. I saw that and I was like, "Oh my gosh, like that's so smart, right?"
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's an idea for up and coming builders. But in terms of our own processes, so I mean, I think largely hired in part because of my consulting background, in that I've kind of like worked with firms to mainly on the IT side, but just do operational improvements. Yeah. So for us, I would say there are 2 things that I know that we've improved. Both of them are related to cash flow. On the AR side, which still has the most room for improvement, but has gotten substantially better. It is very complicated to invoice for these projects. You would think it's simple cost plus, You have your costs, you multiply that by the percentage, and that's your fee, and you're a pass through. That was kind of my naive assumption too. It's so much more complicated than that. And two things come to mind. The first is the way I would start or contextualize is it, and this is something that my boss said to me and I think about all the time, is for us, any given project, that's one of 18 projects. So even for a project manager, it might be one of 3 projects they're on.
Mm-hmm.
But from that homeowner's perspective, it is their only project usually, and it might be the only custom home they build in their house in their lifetime, right? So they are remembering every little detail, right? Every little screw up, every little promise we made them that didn't happen, little financial promises. So like we might have said, you know what, that is not part of fee, like you're going to order your appliances separate. There's like little one-off things like that. And so making sure that like all those little things that occur in the field day to day translate onto an invoice is quite hard. And how that's been managed in the past is kind of like you have your QuickBooks version and you have your like Excel actual invoice version, and maintaining that tie off is very difficult, right? And you do the Excel to do the accommodation. So we're trying to move towards unifying those things. That's the one big thing that I've been working on here. The other half of the AR puzzle is, let's say you generate an invoice and you send it to them. Well, that might generate 10 tiny questions that need to be backed up with data and, why this, why that. And the more questions you generate, aka like the less descriptive your invoice, this being an invoice you send to a client, not an invoice we receive from a vendor.
AR.
Right. The better job I do expressing all the detail in the invoice, the less questions I'm going to get, and the more time I'm going to save myself on the back end. So trying to send little packages of information, not just like line item, management fee, but here's a fronter, here's a page of notes explaining things, here's a well-crafted email around it. Those are, I'd say, the 2 things on the AR side that are hard. So making an invoice actually reflect promises in the field, and then making sure it has actually sufficient detail, but not overwhelming detail.
Mm-hmm.
That's the AR side. On the AP side, we've gotten a lot better. And, adaptive is a part of that, but also just really silly blocking and tackling things. Like when I started, we did not have a consistent set of cost codes. We had an overly detailed list, hundreds of cost codes, when in reality we might need, over 100, maybe less than 200 to adequately describe what we do. And, between that and a description field and your accounting software of choice gets you what you need. And that initiative of meeting with project managers, meeting with Michael, meeting with Karen, our director of finance, and culling that list and actually implementing it and explaining the deprecation of old codes and what maps to what, that has made our AP a lot tighter. And it was already tight before. We were already paying on time, but it's more on like the reporting side. Where that really matters is like my ability and Karen's ability and like the back office ability to understand our finances quickly.
Mm-hmm. I literally hear guys just get slaughtered with this, and it almost becomes a cost code fatigue conversation. It's like they're just like absolutely worn out with trying to figure out how to get into cost codes that they're going to stick to, and then why even do this to get the benefit out of it. Mm-hmm. What is the biggest challenge to putting together good cost codes? Because that is just episode after episode, conversation with builder after conversation with builder, like one of the most crucial components to running a very healthy back office. What's the biggest hang up in your opinion?
Oh yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode just on this. I could write a book.
You should do it, and then we'll plug it.
To me, the way I would start, I'll approach it from 2 directions. In a dream world, you start a construction business and you have an excellent set of cost codes from the beginning, because it is always easier to start correct and maybe you tweak a bit, etc., than to create this huge thing to navigate and then have to go through this big implementation project down the road to correct this thing you built up front. Mm-hmm. And the way I think about that is like in business school, they teach you to have a business plan. And if I was starting a GC, like part of my business plan would be, what are my cost codes? Mm-hmm. Right. Setting up day one. That's the ideal world. Now let's presume, which is true here and with most businesses, that that's not where they're coming from. The way I would approach it is I would first start with an estimate. I'd pick your best estimate. I would say, like, what is a good house that we've built and then we've done a good estimate for? Like the estimates versus actuals are pretty close. And I would say like that probably does a decent job of capturing all the different like line item level cost codes, right? And if anything, it's probably a little bit too, or a little bit not enough. Like maybe you need a little bit more detail than that. So I'd start with that small list and I would expand outward until I get my, I guess, ideal list. Okay. And at that point, I do some stakeholder stuff. So I'd meet with any relevant stakeholders, my project managers, maybe my owner, if you're someone like me and you're in an operations role, and I would basically get approval like, yep. Ooh, actually you should split this, or ooh, actually these are the same thing, right? Like maybe in plumbing, you don't need sewer line. You could just have plumbing labor, right?
Right.
It's person to person. So you do your stakeholder analysis, and then you got a good set. Then what you would do is you do a mapping exercise. So you'd then pull your list of your actual cost codes and you'd actually map what old legacy cost code goes into the new one. Okay. And that'll do two things. One, that will let you see anything you missed, which happens. And then two, it'll give you a sense of like how painful this is going to be. Because then the actual, let's say you finalize your list, and usually at that juncture, I'd maybe meet with, once you've your mapped table of old to new, I'd probably meet with stakeholders again just to run them through one more time. The actual implementation nitty gritty is painful. And the way we chose to do it is not necessarily the only way to do it. We chose to do it pretty manually. We didn't have so many that connecting to QuickBooks' database and writing ETL code or hiring someone to do that was worth it. We just did it manually, which I think for most builders would work. That said, if you have a really, really complicated implementation, so like your actual table, your legacy table didn't really match your new ideal cost codes, you can hire someone. So I would go out and I'd get a consultant, and it's a one-time exercise, and it'll be money well spent. And so that's just really like right size based on the firm. And we did it manually, like I said.
Yeah. Dr. Dollar, I'm going to keep going unless you want to interject.
No. The cost codes, I'm sitting here listening to Levi describe cost code GPT here that we're working on. So
it is hard to describe how important good cost codes are. It is so crucial.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, and what about the builders out there that just, again, they've got the cost code fatigue. A lot of them, I think they understand the benefit of having cost codes and emphasizing job costing. But can you explain just succinctly what that does to a business when you do have seller cost codes? Like you go through all this painful effort, right? You mentioned it's just brutal. Going through it, effort, labor, multiple people involved, a lot of thought, a lot of mapping, a lot of business stuff. Why? Why would you embark on that journey to get stellar cost codes?
Yeah, so it's going to sound like I have a bit of a pre-canned answer, and that's because I had to explain to our project managers why this is important. And so like the way I phrase it is I call it the estimate to draw pipeline. So basically it's three components. You start with an estimate, then you have bills and expenses, and then you actually have the draw. Yeah. And if you do cost codes correctly, what you're able to do is you're able to estimate at the cost code level. You then actually generate bills and expenses at that cost code level. And then at the end, when you go to draw, so either you're going to a bank or you're going to a client, and you're actually getting paid back plus your fee, you are able to account and say, I've paid for every bill and expense that I've incurred. And then can map the money I've received, the AR, to the money I spent, the AP, all the way back to the estimate at the beginning of the project, what I said it would cost, right? That's like the ideal. That's what we're striving for. And even here, we're not perfect. We still have a lot of room to grow. But that would be the advantage of a cost code, is that of a well-done cost code, is that you're able to maintain that pipeline.
Yeah, Reece, I think that's a great point for, obviously you guys, most of what you're doing is cost plus, right? At Ladisic? Is everything cost plus?
Almost always. The only situation which we wouldn't be is occasionally we'll do a fixed fee, and that's pretty rare. That's that's a real edge case. It's almost always cost plus.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because what we often see, so in fixed price builders, right? Cost plus, like intuitively people understand the connection between and the importance of like tracking both cost and income at that cost code level, right? Down to the nitty gritty, because you have to in cost plus. In fixed price, you often have just a lump sum invoicing schedule or a summarized invoicing schedule. So people are a little less focused on actually connecting the costs and having the income done at a specific cost code level. It's just like, oh, framing, I'm going to bill this much for framing. And then people lose sight of this kind of cost code based profitability, which to your point comes back to the estimate over time.
Yeah. At a minimum, even in a fixed fee, you'd still have that tight connection between estimate and the bills and expenses. So you would still benefit from there. But yeah, I hear what you're saying is because so much of my work is cost plus, I care a lot about getting paid back on a bill.
Well, no, I'm saying that like your connection back to the estimate is what makes it relevant for fixed price builders. And I think
exactly.
Often people just think about the connection being like, what do I have to do to build an invoice? Not necessarily this long-term or like growth mindset orientation you have around consistently improving your ability to estimate accurately.
Yeah. That's the feedback mechanism. Oh, another thing to do is we have our estimates now mapped to our cost code. So like you have an estimate template. We have several, but out the box, there's no. I don't have to go back in and map from my estimate to my cost code. It's just straight up the actual template is our cost codes.
Yeah.
And there's two ways of doing that. You can have an expansive one, so where you can add cost codes, and you can also have a one where you cull down. So you have every conceivable cost code and you reduce from it.
Yeah. We so there's the point you made. I think is important on doing the invoicing at a cost code level, just so you have like tight connection on the cost and revenue associated with all of your budget items. Then there's also the challenge we see, kind of related to the point you're just making, where builders have these like super detailed estimates that they have in Excel, and then a much more summarized version of cost codes in accounting, right? So there's estimating at this granular level of detail. Then the project actually happens. The costs are actually incurred, but they never ultimately map those costs back to the detailed estimating. So that doesn't. How do you change? How do you know what to change when you're doing estimating that way? So I think that's another challenge if you have a perspective on it.
Yeah. I mean that like, so there are instances where we might estimate and not have a cost code, but then we make it easy on our template to roll that up, right? So even if I like want to go one level deeper than a cost code maps, I have it already mapped to what it's going to live as. And then it's just a quick exercise where like Michael might finish the estimate. He says, all right, Levi, I did a detailed estimate, not a cost code estimate. And then I basically just have to delete one column and then group by cost code, and I'm there, and I can just upload it directly into my software. That is like the solution. What you're saying, like it's sometimes you want a level of depth, especially with what we're doing where the houses are quite complex. Another way of phrasing this that I think about it is, and this is relevant to like we were talking about earlier with back office as competitive advantages, outside of maybe whatever your owner salary is and maybe some senior PM salaries, some of the most expensive time in most construction companies are back office employees, right? Because usually with field employees, that's what those folks want to be doing. There's different labor conditions as it relates to field individuals. In the back office, we're competing with corporate America for most of these roles, right? So just naturally drives wages higher. So it's just in most companies, that's going to be true. And so we will think about, as we're designing processes, like we have to build a process that consumes the minimal amount of back office time, right? And the ideal there is always like you can press a button. So like on the AR side, like what we're striving for is like we press a button and it prints a report, and that's what we send to the client, right? And so in any of these processes we're designing it, the estimation process, if we don't have a template I can quickly convert to my cost codes, it's worth spending time to design that up front because it's going to save me expensive back office time.
Yes, exactly. That's the key. So like, naturally you're going to have some more detail when you're estimating, but if it doesn't roll up to a category that matches to the cost codes you're using to code, then you're never going to have that feedback loop of what did I expect this would cost and what did it actually cost, right? So,
and I'm going to spend back office time, expensive back office time, if I want the feedback loop generating it, right?
Yes. Because then you got to do your own manual reconciliation.
100%.
This detailed code goes into that more summarized code. This one. The other thing I see happening is builders will try, sounds like maybe Ladisic when you joined, to make their cost code list the same level of depth as their estimate, right?
Yes.
So, like like something super detailed, whatever, like bedroom door handles. And that's just not practical, right? So then you're going to have a bunch of false precision when the coding's happening because no one's going to know how to break down all these invoices at that granular of a level. So that's the other issue.
Yeah, that's how we ended up with when I came here. Is that's what happened? Is they were trying to match estimates and they ended up with hundreds and hundreds of cost codes, right?
Mm-hmm.
False precision, not useful precision.
Yeah. Yes. Cool. Reece, sorry
I hear it
for
all the time.
interjecting.
No, I mean, that's spot on. I mean, that's when we're talking to prospects, customers, builders about these types of processes. I think this is a very meaningful conversation to contextualize from a builder standpoint what this actually does to the business, because it has nothing to do with is the work getting done. But I love like the useful precision comment, because if we are going into a big, deep list of cost codes, and I hear people say, we axe the cost codes and we have 3. We have labor, material, and subcontractors. And then you seriously sit there and you're like, this is going to be an uphill battle, like trying to explain why this isn't advantageous for the business, while you also carry empathy for them to understand why they moved in that direction, because how difficult it is for an individual to look at an invoice and say, I know that it's for this project and for this cost code. And it typically requires getting other people involved to have these types of conversations. Now it's not just the expensive back office person, it's the expensive project manager person who's not supposed to be doing it, who's all of these people are involved. So being able to understand why you would want to make these moves and build processes around it, all with the benefit of how do we reduce as much overhead that's involved in this situation and these types of processes to get us the data that we need to make sure that our estimates are accurate, that we were forecasting the profitability that we thought we were going to make and not have to expend more this time. Synopsis by Reece.
There we go.
Yeah.
That's the other problem. That's the other one.
It's just the amount of time by default that not having this level of data creates is brutal.
Yeah.
From a decision-making standpoint in the field on a day-to-day and just an overall project standpoint.
Yeah. So what are the 3 problems then? Cost code list is too detailed. Cost code list has no detail, and actual costs are not connected to original estimate.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty much it. If there is a 4th, it's communicating to our project managers what goes in what. Most of our folks are pretty good, I will say. We do very little recoding. But yeah, I would say it's basically that, what you just described.
Cool.
I love it.
Cool. Well, what do you think? I mean, I guess we could go on talking about these back office topics. I think this was a pretty good episode. What do you think, Reece?
No, I think this was a great episode. And I think having Levi back on, if that's in his cards or interest, would be great to go even deeper on it, because I think these are the realization that the back office isn't just there, and they are a massively critical component to the business, and it is massively important to run it effectively and efficiently. To the opening comment, it can create a competitive advantage in the market, and it can open up the doors for you to scale to whatever you want to do. If you don't want to do 40 units a year at extremely high-end product, great. It still is as important to the guy who wants to clip 3 to 5 projects a year. You still need to know your numbers. You still need to know why you're in it. I was reading a book on a pretty big contractor in the United States, and they were talking about like back in the 1920s that they implemented these types of practices, and that was what they attribute a ton of their growth is to understanding their numbers. Are we taking on work? Are we winning projects that we can accurately forecast to win and grow the company? Growing the company can be different in a million different directions. So I think we're good. I'm rambling at this point. Levi, this was incredible. Your wealth of knowledge. Appreciate you hopping on, dude. This was great.
Yeah, for sure. This is great. And love the product. Love talking with y'all. And let me know if you want to hop on again.
Yeah. Well, I think we do, cost codes from the builder's perspective. Maybe we just dig in deep there, a little master class with Levi Joseph. You mentioned mapping. You mentioned mapping, and my eyes glazed over. I was like,
so my old analytics days, but not something that's rocket science. I mean, just a good Excel, 2 lists.
God, nothing like a good old fashioned Excel. You gotta love them. Cool. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. Appreciate you, Levi. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
All right. Talk to you soon. See you later, Levi.